Hello and welcome back to another episode of Sideline Stories. I am your host, Chase McTaggart, and today we have a very special guest coming from ESPN, a technical director, Shannon Szefinski. How are we doing today, Shannon?
I'm great. How are you?
Awesome. Happy to have you. This is a new guest. I don't think we've had a TD on before, so we'll kind
It's
of get into
exciting.
this. This is very exciting. So, just to kind of start with the beginning of your career, when did you first realize you wanted to work behind the scenes in sports media and in broadcasting?
Well, it's actually funny because when I was in high school, I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I took an accounting class and I thought I really liked that. So I was like, yeah, I could be an accountant. Like I like math and they make a lot of money. I'm good with that. But then I actually ended up having a conversation with one of my family friends who works on, at the time, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. And she was a script supervisor. And basically, like, a main part of her job was to make sure that if they were taping over, say, a few days, or even like if they took a lunch break in between the day, to make sure things on the set and things with the people, the contestants on the show were had continuity and they were consistent across the board. And I'm like, that's so funny because whenever I watch TV with my family, I'm always like, oh, that fork was empty before and now there's something on it. Like I would always notice those things. And so then I was like, wait, I can do that for a job. And so I had thought that I wanted to work in TV. Like I had always thought like SNL would be like the pinnacle for me. And then once I started taking classes at Sacred Heart, I realized that I might be more interested in the sports media side of it. That was what I got. One of my first internships was on a sports highlight show called CT Sports. And CT Sports Now, oh my God, it's been so long, I forgot the full name. And I loved it. I loved the fast pace of it all. And I was like, yeah, I could really get into this. And I played sports growing up. I always was a fan of sports. I would go to Yankees games all the time with my dad, and, like, we were a big sports family, but in my eyes, like, my brother was always the one who was gonna work in sports, and I was gonna, do something else, but I never saw that as a career path for myself until I started getting those opportunities and seeing things like that in college, and then it kind of just snowballed, and it was one thing led to another, led to another, led to another.
It's funny that you say snowball because the last guest I had on last week was Mike Tolley, as you probably very well know him, but he said
Yes.
the same thing. Really, it comes down to snowball effect. Like you
Yeah.
start small and you just keep going, and things just like compound on over time, and eventually
Yeah.
you are where you wanted to be. And
Yeah.
it's really cool.
It really is. It's like I always saw those people, and, like, Tully was one of those people where I looked up to and was like, "You've gotten so far in your career, and you started at Sacred Heart." It's like, how is someone like me supposed to get to a point like that? Like, it seemed impossible, but then just like I said, like Tully said, like, it really is just, like, one foot after the other, and things just keep leading to more things.
So I kind of wanted to touch back on what you mentioned before about kind of storytelling and setting things up like that. So you've
Mhm.
worked your way up from assistant editor roles to managing editor, senior producer. How did those storytelling roles help you later in your now technical roles?
Yeah, that's a really good question. A lot of my early on experience was more storytelling, right? Like I worked for the newspaper at Sacred Heart. I was a producer for the Pulse at Sacred Heart, and even like into my earlier internships where I was interning at the Maury Show and the Olympics, like all of these things, you're telling a story one way or another. And I remember bringing that up in my interview for the Olympics, where at the end of the day, like you're just trying to tell these athletes stories. And it might be an athlete where everyone knows who they are, like Simone Biles, or you're trying to convey a story of an unknown athlete that nobody knows. But either way, like both of those stories need to be told, and both of those stories are important.
Totally.
Um, and it's it's interesting because now in my role, in a more technical role, I started at ESPN as a replay operator before I became a technical director, and I would say you see that storytelling a little bit more on the replay side because, you're building packages or highlights, things like that, like to help tell that story. But now in my technical director role, it's a little bit different. And I would say that because I'm on the studio side and I mainly work on SportsCenter, a lot of what we do are trying to like make these highlights that everybody knows a little bit more fun in a way. And like, um, so the most recent example I can think of is we were talking about Jalen Brunson, and we had a graphic up in the studio, and it was just an image of Jalen Brunson, and the text said Brunson burner. And it was like
Awesome.
it was him with the text over a blue background. And then I was able to create an effect so that the background turned red, and then I had fire come up and the lights in the studio kind of went dark. So it's like Brunson burner, but now it's with flames, and like you're creating more of a story than just like he had a good game, you know?
That's awesome.
Um, so it's a very different way of storytelling. But it's still storytelling nonetheless, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, kind of touching on the replay part of your
Mhm.
career. So, you originally started in replay, transitioned to technical directing. This kind of a two-part question. What would you say were the transferable skills there, and what initially drew you to TDing?
I always loved TDing. I started TDing when I was at Sacred Heart. I was a sophomore, and I was doing like the studio shows, like our classes and things like that. And I ended up working up to doing games with Professor Thorne, and I always loved TDing. And I didn't have a lot of confidence in myself as a TD. And it wasn't until Thorne had said, like, I can see you TDing the biggest games in sports. And I was like, I never looked at myself like that. I always enjoyed it, but I never saw myself on that level. And I think it took like somebody else seeing that in me for me to be like, okay, maybe this isn't as crazy of a reach as I think it is. Um, and when I ended up getting the replay position at ESPN, I kind of made it known from day one that my ultimate goal was to be a TD. And I was able to make a lot of connections with the TD management group, with other TDs, and I would sit with them and learn from them and observe them. And I kind of just like created my own path. And I remember on my first day of work at ESPN, my manager at the time had said, like, you are in charge of your career. Like, you are the person who is going to drive your career.
Totally.
And I kind of took that and I ran with it. I was like, okay, then I'm going to, if I'm like, and that's what's so great, I think, about ESPN is that no one's going to be like, oh, what do you want to do today? Like, what do you want to do with your life? But if you have a goal in mind, every single person there is going to help you get to that point. And if you're putting in the effort for your career, you're going to see everybody else put in that effort too to be able to help you get to that stage. So I was able, you ask about like transferable skills, right, from replay to TD. And I think that starting off as a replay operator, I was able to create relationships with directors, assistant directors, other TDs. And so when I moved into that TD role, now it was a little different for me because when I was on replay, I was on nights. And then when I became a TD, I went to morning. So I wasn't working with the same group of people,
Right.
but some of the people were. And you already have that level of respect and trust, and you have a relationship with those people. And that goes a really long way because, yes, we're in the business of sports and we're in the business of TV, but at the end of the day, you're in the business of relationships. And having that trust between a director and a TD is huge. And being able to walk into a control room and your director be able to breathe a sigh of relief because they know that they can trust this person, like that's huge. And that just takes time. But I was fortunate where I was already in the company. So I had some of that foundation already built. So it was a little less scary.
Right.
Trying it's not like you're starting from 0, like you're starting from maybe 15 instead. So they definitely related in that way.
That's awesome. So, kind of going back to the connections thing that you had mentioned. So, you'd worked a lot of different positions, but what would you say, what separated the internships that helped you learn from the ones that helped you get hired? Was it the connections like you had mentioned, or was it the the skills that you had taken away from those?
That's a really good question. I will say surface level, having NBC on your resume just helps.
Right.
Um, and then from there, it's just how you I always say this to people who ask me for advice going into like an internship interview or a job interview. They're going to teach you the skills. That is a no, like everyone goes through a learning curve when they get hired for something. I always find that the people who are hiring you are looking more towards your personality because like I said, we're in the business of relationships. You are going to spend so much time with these people. They want to make sure that you're someone that people want to be around and
Right.
you can be that person who isn't going to be like a sad sack like, "Oh, I have to be at work for 12 hours." Like that just comes with the territory. So, I am a firm believer that it's more your personality that gets you hired than your skills. Yes, the skills are 1000% helpful, and I'll share this that when I got hired with the Kansas City Chiefs, when they offered me the job, they said to me, they were like, "We typically hire people from bigger schools just because they're used to a massive
Production.
program like that, like a big football program, things like that." And they were like, "We got hundreds of applications from people from SEC schools, ACC schools, whatever." But they were like, "You stood out even though you went to a small school because you were able to do so many different things." And in those entry level positions, it is so important that you're versatile and that you're able to do multiple things because you never know what the day is going to bring.
Right.
Like in my position at the Chiefs, I was working in a control room, but I was also editing videos and working on After Effects and working on things that were going to go on the video board. Um, so being well-rounded is huge, and I remember thinking that that was a negative that I had so many interests, and it ended up being such a positive because it led me to that position with the Chiefs, which then just, like, propelled me forward, and I will say too, like, I got my position with ESPN as a replay operator following my job at the Chiefs because I had this much replay experience from the Chiefs. Like, in-out clip is all I knew, but they were like, "Yep, that
Enough to get
works."
by.
Yeah, like, literally, I truly believe that, yes, like and I share both sides of that where it's like, yes, the companies on your resume helps, like your NBCs, your CBS, whatever, that helps, but that's not to say that the smaller things don't matter either because I had Sacred Heart on my resume and I still stood out to them somehow, you know? So
Right.
there's two sides of it, but I mean, being yourself is the biggest thing. Like I can't stress that enough. That showing your personality and just showing that you're a people person is bigger than anything that can be on your resume.
I think that's great advice. Great
Yeah.
advice. So kind of going off of the skill thing, I've been meaning to ask you this question. So, what would you say a technical skill or position that students often underestimate or underutilize? Something that, like, for example, you said replay. I feel like a lot of people they underestimate replay, but it's ultimately, sometimes it's your first entry level role because it's a niche thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'll say, like, the one thing I never did at Sacred Heart was replay. That is the one machine I never touched. And everyone thought it was so funny that that was my first job. um, but I think this feels like it sounds kinda cliche, but I feel like a someone like a utility or a grip or a PA is like students, when you're on the student level, I feel like they kind of brush that aside sometimes, where it's like, "Oh, I'm just gonna hold a cable for a game." But like you said about replay, like, that's a lot of people's entry level jobs, and that is also a position where, "Okay, I'm holding this cable for a 3.5-hour game, but I'm literally tethered to somebody who's doing what I wanna do." That's,
Right.
like, such a good networking opportunity. Um, I just think that no job is too small and someone has to do it. And if you're the person who's told to refill the fridge with water bottles, like, you better make sure that that fridge is stocked and someone's gonna notice. Like, I, it's, it sounds so cliche to say, but it's so true. Like, everybody has to start somewhere, but you need to make yourself stand out wherever that is. And if that's like networking with somebody while you're on lunch during a game, or you're the first person to put 4 more water bottles back in that fridge, everything is important. And I even remember when I was in grad school and Thorne would stress how important it was for the person who was picking up the food, that they were picking up the food. Like, this is back in the day before Chartwell's catered.
Right.
But like, we would go to Best Eds and we would pick up the food and we would bring it. And like, that's so important because if people aren't eating for 8 hours, that's a bit of a toxic environment.
You don't want hangry
So
people on site.
no, no. And I'm victim of being hangry. So you don't want that. But I just think that every single role is important, and even if you're not in the role that you wanna be in, no one is stopping you from just talking to those people who do have that role, and that's what I took advantage of when I was at ESPN. I was like, "Okay, I'm a replay operator, but I know I wanna get to this place. I'm gonna talk to those people who have that job," and people noticed, and people were impressed by it, and don't wait for somebody to come to you. You go to them because you know what you want, they don't know what you want.
Totally agree. And I mean, that's kind of why I started this podcast, get to talk to, like-minded people, professionals in the industry like yourself, and
Yeah.
take a lot away from these conversations. There's definitely a lot to learn.
No, that's so great for you to do, that's awesome.
Thank you. So now kind of talking about, you're kind of further in your professional career, some accomplishments. You worked for both the 2020 Tokyo Olympics and the Beijing 2022 Olympics with NBC Sports. What was that experience like from your personal end?
It was the greatest experience. I was doing, like, we were digital production assistants. We were basically watching the events live and just clipping important moments, essentially. We would, like, cut them dirty, just put them on a timeline, and the actual editors would do stuff with it. But my gosh, it was the best experience. And the Tokyo ones were a little bit different, right? Because those games were postponed because of COVID, and they were still doing it, but we were still in COVID restrictions. So we literally, the hotel that we lived in, we worked in. We like
Oh,
went
wow.
upstairs to go to bed and we worked out of the ballroom. Like, they couldn't have everybody at the NBC Sports headquarters because of COVID.
Right, like
So,
capacity requirements and
yeah, exactly. And I mean, like, we all got so close, and that was, like, my first real, like, yes, I interned, like, at the Maury show and everything, but I knew a lot of people there. There were a few Sacred Heart people there, so it was, like, comforting in that sense where it's like, okay, I always had someone to turn to if I had a question that I was too scared to ask or something. But the Tokyo Olympics were the first thing that I did, like, completely on my own, like, no friends by my side. And it was scary, but it was the best experience. And then they asked me to come back for Beijing, which was
awesome.
awesome. And I got to go to the headquarters this time. And that was great because I was one of, I think, like, 3 or 4 of us who had come back from Tokyo. So
Oh,
we were
wow.
able to, like, help other people and, like, help the people who hadn't done it before adjust, and, like, it was a really, really great experience, and I every single person who works at NBC that I encountered was an incredible person, and I am so jealous of all the people working the Olympics right now because I wish that I could do that in my full-time job at the same time just because it really was such a unique experience and something that, like, in 20 years, I'm gonna look back and be like, "I worked 2 Olympics. That's crazy. That's, like, the weirdest thing ever." Um, so, yeah, I mean, it was incredible.
It sounds like it, and I mean, that's like a once in a lifetime opportunity, definitely a goal of mine. Um, so kind of on that note, how different is an Olympic production compared to just a regular season sports broadcast? I mean, obviously, it's an international broadcast, there's a lot more that goes into it. What did it look like from your end?
Well, from my end, it was I didn't see any of the real production side of it, because of my role, it was more like in an quote unquote editing capacity on like a very
Right.
basic level. Um, but the number of people involved in that is crazy. I mean, we had like I I don't even know how many people at Stanford, but then you have all the people in Beijing or in Tokyo, and it's a huge production and there's so much that goes into it. And I think you take a step back and it's like, okay, I'm like this small in how big this event is, but yet my role is still important. And people are still looking to me to get them clips and viral moments for social media and stuff like that. So I
Absolutely.
think the fact that I don't even know how big it is just goes to show how big it is.
Right. That's awesome. And that kind of stems into my question of like, how do you handle and this is related to the Olympics, but also just working larger events. How do you handle the pressure when you know millions of people are watching, especially as a TD, kind of transferring out of the Olympic position necessarily, but like you're the one who controls what's going on the screen. That's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, I think that um it's funny because when I was in college and I was in grad school and we were doing our productions, and at the time we weren't on ESPN Plus, we were on NEC Front Row. Um, and we used to if we had a bad broadcast, we'd be like, no one's even watching. And it's funny because like I do find that like I kind of slip into that mindset now sometimes. Like even if not even just like a mistake, it's like if things just felt clunky, it's like, "Oh, no one's watching anyway." And then you're like, "Wait, it's ESPN, people are watching." So that's like it's funny because when I told Thorne that I was TDing the 7 a.m. Sports Center every day, he was like, "That's crazy." He's like, I used to watch the 7 a.m. Sports Center every single day before I would go to school, and now you're TDing Sports Center." And it doesn't hit me until, like, people like, my mom will say something about it's like it's just you have to take a step back, right? Because you get into the mundane of, like, "Okay, I'm going to work, we're doing pre-prod, I'm doing the show," and you have to take a step back and be like, "This is what I worked for, and now I'm here, like, I'm doing what I wanted to do," and that is, like, the craziest concept to wrap my head around, and I think that I get a little desensitized to it nowadays, but I will tell you, when I worked for the Chiefs, it was our first home game, so it was, like, after preseason, because again, I was a little desensitized to preseason. It's like everything's so new and it's like, what am I doing? But with the week one home opener where we did the banner reveal and everything, I remember pulling into the stadium, parking, and just crying. And I was like, what am I doing here? Like, this is crazy. Um, so I think that that's something that like I wanna take a step back more because I don't wanna get stuck in the, like, you go to work, you come home, you go to work, you come home, and it's, like, not to say and I will say, like, I am thrilled going to work every single day. I'm so excited going to work. I'm so happy. I'm like, "I get to push buttons. I love pushing buttons."
Right.
Um, like, the joy is there, but I don't think that the realization of the magnitude is there. And maybe that's for the best, like you said, the pressure of it all, like, maybe it is better that I don't think about that every single second of being in that chair, but
Right.
I think that the adrenaline rush that you get from that pressure is something that I was always drawn to. Like, even when we were doing our studio shows in school, like, I always loved the adrenaline rush of that, and I remember saying that in every single interview I've ever been in. I was like, "There's just something about that adrenaline," and, I was like, okay, I was an athlete, but, like, I played soccer and softball in middle school, but, like, my main thing that I did was I was a competitive dancer, and it's like, that same thing, it's like, you could say there's a lot of pressure, like, at moments you're the only person on stage, but, like, you need to be completely calm and, like, not
Right.
show it if you are freaking out. And I think it's the same thing TDing, right? Like, the control room could be on fire, and you and the director just need to be locked into each other, and, like, you have to be just stay calm, cool, and collected, because what is you freaking out even gonna do? Like, that's not gonna fix anything. But at the end of the day, you're still on TV, and things still need to happen. Um but I think also, like, you learn a lot as you go through your years, and I've made a lot of mistakes, and the fun fact about me is when I make a mistake, I make it big. I don't make them small. So, you learn a lot from that, and you learn how to bounce back from things like that, and you persevere, but, like, it happens for everybody. Like, I remember when I made my first big mistake as a TD, I was talking to other TDs and they're like, "Yeah, I've done that before." Like, everybody has a story like that, and then
Right.
that's comforting, um, and it's nice to I remember being in college too and, like, watching ESPN or watching any sporting event and seeing like, a quote, unquote, "mistake," and you're like, "Ah, okay, the professionals do it too." Like, everybody makes a mistake, and I think that's important to remember.
Absolutely. And I think Professor Thorne actually touched on this like last week or whatever when he was talking to us about how he produced the CFB National Championship. Um, the director had called for like a replay or something, and then they just basically put black in program in the middle of the broadcast, and everyone
Yeah,
was freaking out.
yep,
But I didn't even notice it happen because
there
I
you go.
probably looked away from the camera or looked away from
Right,
TV or
or
whatever.
you blinked or
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Um, so I did want to transition to talking about technology, AI, how things are evolving in the
Mhm.
sports media space, especially in your role. So, where are you currently seeing automation or AI enter the control room or just the general broadcasting space?
I think there's like I don't touch it per se on a day-to-day basis. There's a lot of talk about it, and I will say actually, that's a lie. There During college football season, I was on the sports center that was leading into college game day. And for people who know college game day, their big thing is the signs that people hold up.
Right.
And so our last segment of our show was our two anchors, Gary and Randy. They would, I guess, a few days before, like, give our producers basically a description of a sign that they would want. And our producer would put it into some AI, whatever it was, if it was Chad, GPT, or whatever, I don't even know. Um, but and it would spit out an AI sign, and that was our last segment of our show leading into College Game Day, where we would surprise our talent with their AI generated signs, and it was always so silly, and it's like, why does the like, someone's missing an arm or whatever, like,
Right.
because you just leave it, like, raw as is, and they would make fun of it, and it was super fun. Um, but I will say, like, I think there's a lot more on the technology side of it, at least from what touches me, it's more, like cloud-based storage talk, things like that, rather than AI, per se, but who's to say that it's not going to lead to that further down the line? We are, like, revamping a lot of things. I know that they we do have some type of AI service Don't quote me. That's, like, connected to ESPN or Disney or something. Um, but, yeah, for the most part, it's more meant for, like, silly things that we've been
Right.
using it for, at least that I've seen. Not to say that, like, there's not other departments using it differently, which I'm sure they are, but yeah.
And then kind of focusing also on the future, what technical skills should students focus on to kind of stay relevant in this ever evolving space?
Hmm. I think that your basics are always gonna be the same, right? Like, no matter what editing software you're using, because all of these companies are using different editing software. Like, I know for a fact that ESPN, NBC, and CBS all use 3 different softwares.
You guys use
So,
Avid or no?
no, we use something that's called Contel that, was made, I think, for ESPN, and it's basically, like, under the Grass Valley umbrella, I think.
Interesting.
Um, and but it's being phased out. Like, even for us, like, we're starting to look towards, okay, what's the next step? Because this is getting phased out. So, I think that while the softwares are all gonna be different, the skills are still the same, right? Like, how to edit a timeline is always gonna be the same. You might have to push a different button on Premiere versus Avid, but, like, the concept is still the same. I think that editing also, like we were saying before, like, your entry level jobs, like an editing position is oftentimes a lot of people's way in the door, especially
Total.
because you do so much of it in college. Um, I also so that's, like, from an editing perspective and maybe from, like, a shooting perspective, like, if you're passionate about, like, content creation or shooting features or things like that, like, same goes with the editing, like, your cameras are gonna change, but the how to focus a shot, how to use your rule of thirds, like, those things are never gonna change. While the camera might be different, that is still gonna be the same. And then when it comes to the control room, right, like, even their technology is constantly changing, and it's like, okay, are you, like, a Grass Valley company? Are you a Ross company? But, like, you the basics, again, are still the same. So, I wouldn't get so hung up on, like, "Oh, well, we use Ross here, but they use Sony here." Like, the concepts are the same, and companies understand also that what you're getting on a college grad school level might not be the same as what they have at their company. But it's
Right.
like, it's more just like, okay, what experience do you have? How many, like, from my perspective as a TD, like, I was cutting games with what we had like 8 cameras at football with 2 replay channels and 2 graphics channels, and video playback and things like that. Like, that is kind of the stuff that you're gonna more so talk about, and it's like, okay, I'm used to you having this many resources, and it's like, okay, if I am cutting a football game with 8 cameras, that's way different than cutting a volleyball game with 2 cameras. Not to
Totally.
say that one is better than the other, they're both the skills that you need, but they're stepping stones, right? Like, the first thing I ever TD'd was volleyball with 2 cameras, and it was great for when I was first starting because it was slower and it was like, "Okay, I have to latch these graphics to be able to wipe to replay," and it's there that is a perfect place to start, but then, like, keep building off of that. So then maybe you go from a volleyball game to a lacrosse game with 4 cameras, and you're kind of, like, slowly building that up for yourself, but at the end of the day, like, what you're learning in school is fantastic, and there are people I work with that didn't even study this in college. So you're already a leg up from those people. So, like, I truly think that the people coming out of school right now are the best suited for these positions because the control rooms in some of these schools, like, it's just what we do on a little bit of a smaller scale, but, like, all the components are there.
Right.
So, I think it's just touch as many things as you can touch, and learn as much as you can learn, and be a sponge, and I'm kinda getting off topic now, but, like, I just do everything. I had a professor, he doesn't work at Sacred Heart anymore, but he was the best, and on the first day of class, he was like, "I don't wanna see your hands in your pockets." Like, if your hands are in your pockets, that means that, like, you have no intent of learning, and get your hands dirty. If you break something, we'll figure out how to fix it, like, things like that. And you don't know unless you try.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's great advice. So now kind of finishing things up, I did want to talk about like your career growth, ask a couple questions on that matter.
Yeah.
So, um, looking back at your career journey so far, what are you most proud of?
Oh gosh. There's been a lot of things.
Done some cool stuff.
I've done some cool stuff. I will say, what am I most proud of? I think, okay, this is twofold. I think that I'll do one from when I was in school and one from when I was out in the field. So, when I was in school, it was my second year of grad school, either my first or second, I really don't remember these days. Um, but we were doing the Women in Sports Symposium, and that was the first event that I had kind of planned top to bottom, and it is a event that's very important to me being a female in this field, and to see, like, the turnout and the reaction, even just from the people on the panel, they were like, "This was fantastic, like, thank you so much," and that was just really important to me, and, I being in the field now, like, yes, it's still a male-dominated field, but I've never experienced being belittled because I'm a woman or anything like that. So I want my experience to be the majority of the experience,
Right.
and I want other people to feel super welcomed and appreciated. So that was an event that was, like, very early on in my career that is still, like, still holds a special place in my heart. But I will say, like, in my career, I think that being a part of Monday Night Countdown last season for ESPN was something that I never thought was gonna be possible for me, especially, like, after having only been at the company for probably, like, 6 months, and they crewed me on that show as a replay operator, and that was a moment where I was like, "Whoa, why did you pick me for this? And you should not be picking me for this." And I learned so much from being on that show, and that show made me a better replay operator. And
Sure.
then I became a trainer for newer replay operators, and I was able to take what I learned from that experience and teach it to other people, and that it was the hardest show I've ever been on, but it was so rewarding at the end of that night when it was like, "Okay, we did a good show." And that was something where the imposter syndrome was so present, but I was still able to rise to that occasion. And I think I proved a lot to myself being on that show, and, when things are hard, I think I look back to that and I'm like, "Hey, if you can do that, you can do anything." Um, so yeah, those were 2 really cool experiences.
Those are really cool. I mean, it's awesome that you've accomplished those things. And so now kind of talking about the future of your career, you've done a lot here at ESPN and also, like I said, you mentioned working for the Olympics at NBC. What does success look for you now? Like what are your goals, next 5, 10 years here?
I'm thinking about this a lot recently because a lot of people have asked me that, and it's hard for me, I think, even still to wrap my head around the fact that I'm a TD, which is crazy because it's almost like April will have been a year,
Wow.
and it's something that I never thought I would achieve this early in my career. And so being here, I'm like, "What the heck am I supposed to do now?" Like, I there are, of course, bigger shows that I wanna be on, and I have larger goals for myself in that sense. Um, but then also there's always in the back of my mind, like, coming from Sacred Heart, it's a very live event focused program at Sacred Heart, and that is what most of my background is in. And I'm very content on the studio side right now, and I still am feeling challenged every day, which is fantastic. Um, but I also don't want to be 30 years down the line and be like, "Hey, I should have tried that live event thing." Um, so that's something that I'm kind of like working through right now, but like right now I'm very content. I still feel like I'm learning something new every day, which is incredible. Um, but yeah, there's bigger shows that I want to get to at some point that I just now am at the phase where, okay, I've done a lot of learning. Now, can I go and sit with those people who have done those bigger shows and learn from them to take it even one step further and just kind of do what I did 2 years ago to get to where I am now and kind of just like do it again but at a different level, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, and I think that's awesome. It's awesome that you're keep building on the already great career that you have going for yourself. So to kind of finish things off here, I did want to ask. I typically ask the guests, what is some advice that you have for students like myself, young professionals looking to get into, potentially the role you're working or just sports media in general?
Yeah, I feel like I have so much advice and I feel like you kind of sprinkled a lot of it in there, but
Absolutely.
um there's don't be afraid to start at the bottom. And by that I mean, especially in a program with like Sacred Heart, and that's the only program I can speak to because that's the only program I've been a part of. But you get exposed to so many things and you get to do so much and you get to be so hands-on and you get to do these big shows on ESPN Plus and SNY and you get really good at what you do there, and that doesn't like, if you're directing shows at Sacred Heart, you're not jumping to being a director at NBC. That's just not how it goes.
Reality.
And yeah, and, like, everybody has to start somewhere, and I think it can be, if you get that first PA job out of school, it's like, "Well, last week I was directing this football game, like, and now I'm a PA," and I think that it's important to not get stuck there. I think that at times it might be discouraging because it's like, well, I was just doing all of this, and that's where I want to be, but on a different level. And it's like everyone has to go through those ranks. Everybody has to be, what is it? The small fish in the big pond, right? Like everybody has to enter that phase at some point, but everybody gets out of it. And I think that that's important to remember. And I think like, I struggled with it, like, when I was at Sacred Heart, I was the GA of the program, like, I was TDing all these games, I was teaching all of these students, like, people relied on me, and people came to me when they had questions, and then you get into the real world, and you're the one asking all the questions. So, I think that it's important to remember that that is completely normal, it's a natural progression, but don't let yourself get discouraged in that moment either. I think it's a lot like, you know, someone said to me once, it's like, at some point you're a senior in high school and then you're a freshman in college again. It's the same thing, but once you're a freshman, you're a sophomore, and then you're a junior and you're a senior and you're back on top again. So it's the same thing, but just know that the light is at the end of the tunnel. Like you will get to where you want to be. You have to put in the work, you have to put in the effort, and you, like I said before, like you drive your own career. But if you're willing to do that, you're going to get to the end of that tunnel and you're going to have a world of possibilities in front of you.
Well, I think that's great advice, Shannon. I think that's a great way to end it off here. Like I said earlier, really appreciate your time. I think there's a
Of
lot to take away
course.
from our conversation today. Almost 45 minutes going here. Definitely, like I said, a lot to take away. So,
Yeah,
without that being said, appreciate you coming on, and
of
until
course.
next time, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chase.
Of course.